Hello everyone, my name is Michelle Kim and I will be presenting to you about my final story map that I created using ArcGIS. Just to give you a brief background about my story and how I came about this topic, everybody has experience being on a road, whether it be driving or living near one. And as college students, my friends and I were always exposed to roads and were faced with how to deal with them um, and we were and are surrounded by them based on where we live. We deal with them when we're trying to travel to somewhere that is not walking distance, and more specifically on what inspired my topic and purpose for my story. As people who are actively involved in the phase of internships and jobs, as I'm sure many of you are, we're faced with the exciting situation of figuring out where we want to and should live during our internships in places that we have never been before. I found my friends and I discussing this a lot and not knowing where to start, which was definitely intimidating and overwhelming. And we would research different areas in a specific city, discuss price points of different apartments or rooms, scan maps to see what's located near these housing options, and other factors. But the main concern that we always managed to land on was whether or not we needed a car. This stemmed from whether or not we should live near big roads, certain advantages and disadvantages that are associated with roads. And to talk a little bit about my story map process, originally I wanted to specifically focus on the correlation between road density and employment. But while researching these two topics and writing my story, I thought that it would be more effective and insightful to offer advice from a relatable standpoint, which is why I decided to look at road density as a whole and more generally. Moving on to my story map, it's called Should You Live Near Big Roads and directly addresses the issue that I've personally faced. And as I briefly mentioned before, and as stated here, the story will discuss the advantages and disadvantages of road density. The story starts off with a short scenario just to engage readers and show somewhat of a relatable scenario to the appropriate audience. It says, Congratulations. We are pleased to offer you an internship position this upcoming summer. All forms have been read through and all contracts have been signed. Next comes the fun part, looking for your home for the summer. But where do you start? In the section that immediately follows the scenario, I discuss everything that I previously said. Just a short background on the story and the key points that I wanted to emphasize were a city usually means close proximity to essential businesses but expensive housing. Big roads usually mean greater access to almost everything, but a need for extra transportation modes. No roads usually mean a quiet neighborhood and cheaper living expenses, but most likely an unideal distance to your company. And at this point, I re emphasize my main question of the story: should you live near big roads? And this is where my story starts. First, I give a brief overview of road density where I explain what it means and define a road network. And road density is basically how much road there is compared to land. So, in other words, a higher road density indicates many roads in a specific area. And to give the audience an idea of road density throughout the states, I included a map that shows you the differences through scales of colors, as you can see here. So the points of white indicate higher road density, while areas of just black, they indicate low road density. And over here, I provide an explanation of this map just to be transparent with the audience. And then I discuss the three different reasons why road density increases, and these include modernization of transportation, road congestion, and accommodation of all vehicles. And for modernization of transportation, I discuss the advancement of technology and development of new features, which leads to more registered vehicles. And as support, I incorporated a bar graph to show the steady increase in registered vehicles in the US from 1990 to 2019, as you can see here. And because there are more cars on the road, there's an increase in road congestion, as I explain here, which is basically the overfill of vehicles on a road and causes slower speeds and longer trip times. This is also more commonly known as rush hour, as many of you have probably experienced while being on a popular road at a specific time in a day. And a go to solution to solving road congestion is building more roads, which increases road density. And the last reason discusses building more roads as a solution to eliminating the risk of accidents due to all different types of vehicles on a road. Next, I move on to talk about some of the benefits of increases in road density, which include effort to prevent environmental issues and greater access. To support greater access to many different types of locations, I chose to focus on employment opportunities by showing a map. This map focuses on Los Angeles, California, as I also focus on in the previous map. And this depicts the employment percentage of the total population that is 16 years and over. So the red spots indicate a low employment rate, while these little sections of blue indicate high employment rate. And this ties in, and as I explained here, it ties in with road density and provides a correlation between employment and road density. And after discussing the benefits, I return back to the topic of road congestion and how research shows that it is inevitable despite efforts to decrease it. One interesting map that I decided to include is this world traffic map that once again shows Los Angeles. The red spots over here indicate road closures, as you can see, and there are many around Los Angeles in this particular area, which can show that there's a steady ratio of closures to number of roads. But aside from this, I move on to discuss induced demand and air pollution, which are direct effects of road congestion. And this brings us to the conclusion where I wrap up my points. In this section, I wanted to convey a more informal side and offer advice and insights. My main goal is to answer the question that I began the story with: should you live near big roads? And through this, I answer it, and I conclude by providing my main takeaway, which is to avoid living near big roads at all costs. But at the end of the story, I provide a bibliography, and I guess some of the main changes that I want to make before the deadline is to change up the format for the bibliography and then maybe include a bit more information about the graphs themselves and the maps. But that's basically my story. So thank you so much for listening.